Hi everyone, I'm David Waldbridge, Associate Director at Harris & Clarke, and today we're talking about valuation process in construction and development projects, and what types are available, how do they work, and what are the differences between them. It sounds straightforward. You do some work, you get paid for it. But in reality, valuing construction works can be one of the most complex and contentious parts of the project, especially when it comes to how stage payments are structured, how monthly valuations are assessed, and what actually counts as completed work. We'll concentrate on how all of this works under the most common forms of JCT contract, which are regularly used across the UK. So let's break it down. What happens, why it happens, and how both clients and contractors can protect their interests along the way. Under a JCT contract, the value of work done is typically assessed through interim or stage payments. This means that instead of waiting until the very end of a project to get paid, contractors receive payments at agreed intervals, usually monthly. The idea is simple. The contractor carries out the work, the contract administrator or employer's agent assesses what's been done, and an interim valuation is prepared. The client then pays the certified amounts, less any retention or adjustments. Now, there are two main ways this can be structured. Number one, stage payments, where payments are tied to specific milestones or stages of completion. And number two, periodic valuations, usually monthly, where the payment is based on the value of work completed up to a certain date. While they fundamentally do a similar job, a regular assessment of what monies are due to the contractor, they can have some quite impactful implications on cash flow and other risk areas. Let's look at both and how they affect the client and the contractor differently. First up, stage payments. Stage payments, sometimes referred to as Alternative A, are common in design and build contracts or similar work where the project is easily broken into clear phases like foundations, superstructure, fit out and so on. For clients, the advantage is predictability. You know what you're paying for and when, which helps manage cash flow and financial planning. Each stage represents a tangible deliverable, so it's easier to see progress before releasing funds. However, the downside is inflexibility and accuracy. The costs associated with stages are commonly derived from a proportion of the contract sum. While this provides a nice, easy to follow format, it is unlikely a true reflection of the costs. For contractors, stage payments give certainty over when money is coming in, but they can also cause problems if the stage isn't clearly defined. For example, what exactly counts as superstructure complete? If there's ambiguity, it can lead to disputes over whether a stage has been reached. That's why clarity in drafting stage definitions at the outset is critical. The more specific the contract is, the less room there is for disagreement later on. Contractors also face risks around cash flow. If the day of valuation comes around and there's been a delay, they could risk having to wait for another monthly valuation period, putting a contractor under additional financial burden. Alternatively, there are monthly valuations. Fairer, but more complex. Most JCT contracts, especially on larger projects, use monthly valuations. Here, the contractor submits a valuation every month, showing what work has been done. These are based on the cost plan or breakdown, which is then assessed and updated at each valuation period to reflect the progress on site and the relevant payment due to the contractor. The contract administrator or employer's agent then assesses that application, checking that the claims work's aligned with what's actually been completed on site to a standard as set out in the contract wording. Once verified and commonly agreed with the contractor, they issue an interim certificate stating the amounts due. From a client's perspective, this approach is more reflective of actual progress. You're paying for work that's genuinely carried out rather than arbitrary stages. It also gives a clear monthly snapshot of project progress, but it does come with more administration and professional judgment. Assessing value means asking what work is complete, what materials are on site, what about off-site materials, variations or defects. But it's the contract administrator's role to remain professional and certify only those works actually complete at the valuation date, especially when there's pressure to maintain cash flow on site. Under JCT, completed work doesn't necessarily mean perfect work. It means work that's properly executed in accordance with the contract. That includes work finished to the required standard, materials properly fixed in place, and in some instances it may include off-site materials, but only if ownership has been passed to the client and a suitable vesting certificate is provided. It's worth noting that defective work shouldn't be valued, even if it's physically complete. Likewise, temporary works, preliminaries and other variations are included, but they must be valued in line with the contract rules and supported evidence. As a client, you should ensure that valuations are supported by detailed site records and that the contract administrator is consistent in applying the same logic month to month. This keeps the valuation process fair and transparent. For contractors, good documentation is everything. Submitting clear, substantiated applications with progress photos, quality takeoffs and up-to-date cost breakdowns helps avoid delays and disputes over payment. Let's look at the broader picture. For clients, the main pros of stage and monthly valuations are: you only pay for verified progress, you maintain control over cash flow, and you reduce the risk of overpayment early in the project. The cons, on the other hand, of valuations can be subjective and lead to disputes. You rely heavily on your contract administrator's judgment, and there's always a lag between work done and payment, which can affect site's morale and progress. From the contractor's point of view, the pros are steady, predictable income streams, recognition of ongoing progress, and reduced financial risk compared to waiting for the final payment. Then there are cons. These are potential payment delays if valuations are challenged, the administrative burden of preparing monthly applications, and the cash flow strain if retention or assessment errors occur. Ultimately, the valuation process should strike a balance, rewarding genuine progress whilst protecting the client from overpaying for incomplete or defective work. To keep valuations smooth and fair, a few key principles help. Clarity at contract stage. Define how and when valuations occur, what documents are needed, and who's responsible for assessment. Consistency. Applying the same approach every month to build trust and avoid surprises. Transparency. Both sides should have access to clear records on how valuations are calculated. And communication. If there are disagreements over quantities or progress, resolve it early before payment deadlines pass. For clients, make sure your contract administrator or employer's agent is diligent and fair in their assessment. For contractors, make sure your applications for payment are clear, justified and timely. When both sides follow the process properly, valuations become less of a battleground and more of a reliable management tool. So that's a look at how we actually value construction works under JCT contracts, from stage payments to monthly valuations, and the pros and cons for both. At its core, valuation is about fairness and transparency, making sure everyone gets paid for what's genuinely been achieved, without putting the project or the client's investment at risk. As always, if you need any help or advice on this or any other topic, please feel free to get in touch via our website, harrisonclarke.co.uk, and I'll see you in my next video.